to the very first episode of PROTOUCH Africa TV. In today's episode, we're going to be taking you through some race day highlights of the recent Joburg Classic. We're going to be running through some race day stats of the event, and we're going to be looking at the current African road cycling rankings. Let's take a look at the race day highlights from Joburg Classic.
With a completely revised route compared to the 2020 edition, the riders had to cover a total distance of 110 kilometers with almost 1,000 meters of vertical elevation. The start and finish of this year's event would be at the Tolton International Raceway, and the final sprint to the line would be a long, flat finish, meaning the riders would have to time their sprint perfectly to take the win on the day. In the Elite and Under 23 men's category, it was Travis Barrett from Cheshire Fields Racing who put in the first attack of the day as the riders headed off the racetrack. With Cycling South Africa enforcing the rule of only 6 riders per team, this would level the playing fields of each team, but also restrict a few riders from taking part on the day. David Murray from Team Enza had good form going into this event as he builds up to the 2021 Olympic Games. He will be representing South Africa on the track in the Omnium event. Some early on attacks saw a few small groups go up the road, but the fresh legs of the peloton brought it all back together. The long drag towards Maripeng put a lot of pressure on the peloton, and Dylan Girdleston from Cheshire Fields Racing put in a big attack and gained a substantial lead over the peloton. The likes of Team PROTOUCH, Team TEG, Team Cycle Power, Team Honeycomb were all playing cat and mouse as they tried to reel Dylan back in. As the day warmed up and some of the riders started to peel off their extra layers, it was a 7-man breakaway that got established on the climb just before the very fast descent down Hekpoort. The 7 riders in the breakaway included Chris Yerster from Team ACDC, Calvin Benneker from Team PROTOUCH, Dylan Girdleston from Team Cheshire Fuels Racing, Casper Kruger from Team TEG, Dylan Geary from the Under 23 Team Dalforno, David Murray from Team Enza, and the ever-experienced DSV rider Jacques Janssen van Rensburg. The 7 riders raced down Hekpoort and worked well together to try and build up a substantial lead over the chasing peloton. With the majority of the major teams represented in the breakaway, there was very little cohesion from the peloton to bring these 7 riders back. As the breakaway turned onto the R96, they had a 1-minute advantage over the peloton. With the peloton realizing they can't let the 7-man breakaway get too far up the road, they started to organize their chase. Andries Negrini from Team PROTOUCH tried to ride across to the breakaway, but unfortunately they were too far up the road at this stage. The 7 riders were working very well up front as they built up their lead to over 1 minute and 45 seconds. Dylan Girdleston happy to commit as his confidence going into this race was high after a very successful recent Gauteng champs. As he peels off the front and heads to the back, he insists on a time gap from his team car. With no teammates back in the peloton, Jacques Janssen van Rensburg from Team DSV happy to commit and roll through as hard as he can. Calvin Benneker also happy to roll through and commit to this breakaway as his confidence would also be high after the recent Tour of Rwanda. At the 60 km and 110 km split, the riders turned left and headed back over the railway line. This section of the race was flat and fast, and if it were to be windy, would cause massive splits in the peloton. The peloton in one long line as they increased their speed to try and bridge that gap to the breakaway. But there was no slowing down from these 7 riders up front as they were all committed to the finish line. All 7 riders happy to commit as Jacques Janssen van Rensburg going all out to make sure this breakaway survives. One of the biggest teams to lose out in the breakaway was Team Cycle Power. They were getting organized up front back in the peloton to try and bring this breakaway back for their team leader, Jade Julius. But in the dying kilometers, the breakaway was set to stay away and Jacques Janssen van Rensburg and Dylan Girdleston had to put in a big attack as they knew sprinting against David Murray and Calvin Benneker would have been tough. But in the final few meters, it was David Murray from Team Enza just out-sprinting Chris Juster from ACDC and Calvin Benneker in third place. And the bunch coming home just over a minute behind the breakaway.
Second running of Joburg Classic, first time I do it. So quite a lekker event. I've actually won a race up this racetrack 9 years ago, so it's nice to repeat that again in pretty much a similar fashion as back in 2012. It was a good breakaway that we got established, and as soon as the break went, we kind of knew it was going to take a big effort from the peloton to bring it back with 7, I would say, really strong guys in the move. Going into, I would say, even the last 5Ks, we actually had Dylan Girdlestone and Jacques Jansen van Rensburg slipped away. So we were 5 left in the little chase group. They put in a really good dig. We caught them just turning into the racetrack with about 1.5K to go. I was on Calvin's wheel and managed to make it past in the last 20 to 30 meters. I knew it was a little bit of a headwind, so to wait a little bit longer than what most of the other guys would, and you can always come from the back on this race on this racetrack.
Yes, this is my first time doing the Joburg Classic. Super cold this morning, but very fast and tough course. Really enjoyed it. The racing was on, and the breakaway managed to go. 8 of us, and we stayed till the finish line. There was a few tactical racing going on in the last 5Ks, but that's cycling, and I managed to get third.
The ladies' race was also well contested, with 3 riders forming a breakaway very early on, with Jo van der Winkel, Hayley Preen and Carla Oberholzer in the 3-lady breakaway. Hayley Preen, the current SA champion, taking home the win.
From about, say, 20 Ks, there was 6 of us that went up the road. And then for the last 80 Ks, there was 3 of us, Paris, Carla and myself. We worked very, very well until the end, rolled nicely together. Came down to a sprint finish. There was a bit of a headwind on the racetrack, so everyone was watching each other, and I left it to the last minute. Racing the SA Stripes I still can't believe it. Very proud, and it's been my first proper race. This has been my first proper race in the SA Stripes, and I love it.
We caught up with Carla Oberholzer and asked her about her final prep towards the Olympic Games.
So I've just been selected to represent South Africa at the 2020 Tokyo Olympics. It's been a long dream of mine to be selected, and after the postponement last year, I wasn't sure if I would be able to keep riding and training at the level necessary for another year. But I'm grateful that I have been, and I really look forward to leaving for Tokyo. Proposed date of flying out is 17th of July, and the road race is on the 25th of July.
That concludes the race day highlights of the 2021 Joburg Classic. For all the latest African cycling news, download the PROTOUCH Africa app. Till next time, bye for now.
So diving into some race day stats of the Joburg Classic, as we can see after the 2 hours and 26 minutes and 110 kilometers of racing, our top 3 men pushed out some decent numbers. In the final sprint, David Murray pushed out 1,078 watts, Chris Juster from ACDC pushed out a total of 1,071 watts, and Calvin Benneker pushing a massive 1,266 watts. If we compare that to their watts per kilogram throughout the race, we can really start to see how much effort each rider started to put in throughout the race. Chris put in a total of 4.48 watts per kilogram throughout the 2 hours and 28 minutes, which really does show how much effort he put in compared to the first and third place rider. 3.89 watts per kilogram for David, and in third place, Calvin Benneker with 3.77 watts per kilogram. So this is where we can really dive into which riders were putting in some massive effort to make sure that breakaway stayed away on the day. Moving on to the current African road cycling rankings, South Africa still maintain the number 1 position. Eritrea are in second, and Algeria are currently in third spot. 10 South Africans are currently in the top 20 individual rankings. Some of these riders include the current African Continental Champion, Ryan Gibbons, Daryl Impey from Team Israel Startup Nation, Kent Main from Team ProTouch, as well as Reinhard Jansen van Rensburg from Team Quebecer Assos. Eritrean rider Marhawi Kudus also moved up into the top 10 recently after a very good stint in France. And Stefan de Bot moved up into the top 20 after his recent top 25th GC placing at the Tour de Suisse. Team ProTouch still maintain the number 1 ranked continental team in Africa, ahead of Team Skoll and Team Benediction, both from Rwanda. Thank you for tuning in to the very first episode of PROTOUCH Africa TV. Please remember to download our app to get access to all the latest African cycling news, as well as all the latest UCI rankings. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you soon.